This is the third option.
Welcome back,
Rick,
and I'm Judy,
welcome back for
or whoever is coming for the first time, welcome.
some of you are watching us on video.
Some of you are listening on like Apple Podcasts or Spotify or some other
Now, our
platform.
podcast is called The Third Option, and that the essence of that is it's love. And it's because, as we started the podcast, it's like some think this and some think that, but we offer a third option, and that's
Mhm,
love. And
mhm,
so we actually will get into that in today's episode because we're looking at the letter of First Corinthians that
mhm.
Paul wrote to the Corinthian church, and we're going to look at the spiritual gifts and in chapter 12, and it actually flows into 13, which says the most beautiful things about love that were ever written, probably. And we'll also look at chapter 14 because we're putting this together because these are talking about the gifts, and he brings love into it because it gives us the meaning of the reason for the gifts
Mhm,
and how to operate
mhm.
best with the spiritual gifts that God gives us. But it's very interesting because he starts out saying, now I want to talk to you about spiritual things, especially the spiritual gifts now.
Yeah, and just a quick overview of this book of the Corinthians. It's written around 50 AD by Paul, who has planted a church. Actually, he planted the church around 50 AD, and the letter is somewhere between 53 and 55. But it is a very interesting, diverse, just crazy group of people that have come together in Christianity, and they're having growing pains. They're learning their way, and Paul is helping them stay the course and continuing to grow in maturity. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they're a special group. You've got Jews that have come from the Judaism and they have embraced Jesus. And you got pagans and from a culture that had like pagan practices like
Hmm.
temple prostitution and all kinds of things. And Paul has to address a lot of things. So you've got this motley crew, and it's really beautiful because we get some of the most beautiful writings because of this.
And I think one other thing is that Corinth was a city, it was a port city in the Roman Empire. And I think that also brought a diverse people group there. There was a lot of class divisions there.
Right, right. And so that's kind of a common thread we see him talking about the divisions and things and
Hmm.
the status thing. And so another thing about him now, as we get into this chapter 12, excuse me, is you can't look at chapter 12 without addressing the fact that they're a very charismatic bunch.
Yeah, they seem to get into it.
They're
Like,
into the gifts,
yeah.
and there are reasons for it. And this is why Paul wants to address it. He starts off by saying, "Now, concerning spiritual things, I don't want you to be ignorant." He starts talking about them, and he validates and verifies the giftings, and says, and let them be done. He
Hmm.
says, but let's look at a better way to do this. And here's why they were. I've wondered why was this particular group of people, why were they so attracted to the gifts that they were?
Yeah.
Why are they? And we have groups that are more into it than others in Christianity too. And why was this group so really into it and attracted? And
Yeah.
what to the point that Paul's telling them like, no, this isn't being done well here. This
Yeah.
isn't
Yeah.
being done right. We're going to have to. I'm going to show you some things about this. So what we find is that one of the things is this: that they come from that Corinthian culture. They come from a culture where things that they're flashy public speaking and things like that, that is something to be esteemed. We have that in the church. I mean, it
Yeah.
can be that way in the church. There's something about someone being on stage, right?
Uh-huh.
That's
Attractive.
that can play into your self validation and pride and ego and things like that. So that's a natural thing that can be done in that, and that's something that they esteemed a lot in their culture. It gave them a sense of importance, and so operating in these things and being vocal in the church in whatever way, whether it's preaching, prophecy, gifting, using the gift of tongues or something like that, they were attracted to that. And also it can, and it was happening here too, become a way to measure maybe spiritual importance,
Mm.
the giftings. And I know that I've seen that in my life as a young Christian. I would see people operate in certain gifts and I would just think, wow, they are just so close to God and so far away from where I'm at, and I hope to be there someday. So we can esteem that as a way of measuring spiritual
Mm.
superiority. We kind of some of us might have given authority to people just simply because they operated in gifts, and you find out later on that the gifts of God are given; they're just there,
Mhm.
and people learn to tap into that and to become sensitive to those things. They can operate in those gifts and be very beneficial to us. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a mark that you're, living well or that you even know a whole lot about God necessarily. It's just a gift. It's something that God's Spirit has for us to operate in if
Mhm.
we will. Another thing about them is that their pagan backgrounds, they had these different cults, and there were frenzied, ecstatic experiences in that. And so the charismatic type of operation sort of plays into that. You can
Mhm.
see how that would work. So they're just
Yeah.
like, oh yeah. And in their pagan cultures, there were people that spoke as mouthpieces for the gods. So now we're Christians, and like, of course, we can still be mouthpieces for God. And so they're attracted to that. So we have those things going on. And those are some very natural, human, fleshly things that Paul address.
Right, to that is kind of,
It can be understood.
yeah,
It
I
can
guess
be
that's what I'm
understood,
saying, yeah,
right?
mhm.
Yeah. So they're manifesting in these things. So Paul's going to bring some order to them. And he acknowledges and validates and verifies the gifts, but he continues to tell them that it's for the benefit, for the edification of the people. It's not about you. It's not
About your
it doesn't make
status.
you the
Yeah,
center. Yeah, it
yeah.
doesn't elevate your status or something. And he tries to get them their motivation to be about come from a more pure place
Mm,
of we want this to be for the people, because
mhm,
when it's done that way, then it comes about in a much more decent way, decently and in order. And it feels like a ministry of God's compassion to someone
mhm.
rather than look what they're doing. They're giving a message in tongues or
Yeah,
they're
it's almost like,
prophesying.
the
Hmm.
gift or the messenger that's using the gift,
Right.
and that isn't the best.
Right. And he tells them, he says, and because you operate in a certain gift, maybe it's more vocal and prominent or something, he says, he gets into the whole analogy of the body, and he says every part is important. He says if you don't operate in this particular gift, it doesn't make you less important, and if you do, it doesn't make you more important. And he says, we're all this, and the body is for the edification of itself. And
Mhm,
if the knee hurt, the hand goes there and rubs it. It cares about it, and the hand doesn't say, "Well, I have no need of you,"
mhm.
because I'm sufficient of
I
myself.
have no need of you.
Me as in need. And he says, and those that seem, he says, those parts that are members of the body that seem less honorable,
Yeah,
let's count them worthy of honor. Now, notice he said they seem less honorable
yeah,
because it seems like certain gifts can make you look better, more spiritual, or more
mhm,
important. And
mhm,
he brings it down to what it's really all about. It's for others. It's for
mhm,
their benefit. It's for edification or building somebody up, exhortation, encouraging somebody, or comforting somebody that needs to be comforted. Here's something that the
good.
Spirit of God would
Mhm,
have for you. And so it's always for the others. It's not anything for us in particular. But he does say, but he says, but go ahead. He says, let those gifts operate. And it's good to want to operate in
mhm,
these gifts because they're good and they're
mhm.
powerful and they're beneficial to people. He says, but let me show you a more excellent way. And this is why we have what's called the love chapter that comes in
Chapter
next.
13, yeah.
Yeah, but it's in conjunction with what he's saying about the gifts.
Right. I don't know that I've ever fully realized that the the love chapter, I've always seen it kind of by itself, and to see it in context of what he was previously talking about, because obviously the letter is wasn't divided into chapters. There wasn't like a
Right.
separate love part. It was all flowing together. So he's been talking to them about the gifts and how good they are, but there's an order and a way of using these gifts that benefits everyone.
Right.
And this is the more excellent
Yeah, it's the
way
more
to
excellent
do
way.
that.
And
Yeah.
this does two things. One, by explaining love, it gives them a way to use the gifts better.
Yeah.
Also, it shows that it's elevated way beyond the gifts because you can elevate the gifts. People there, I have been a part of groups. I've been a part of it
Mhm.
myself where when I look back on it, we elevated the gifts. We gave it so much prominence. We gave it so much attention and it was the gifts, the gifts, the gifts. And
It
it
almost,
wasn't necessarily an emphasis on love.
I was gonna say, it almost bypassed love.
Yeah.
Like, it almost bypassed
Yeah.
the fact that love
Yeah.
would be a part of it,
Yeah.
you know?
So Paul brings it in to where let love be the motivation with
Mhm.
this, but he also explains how it is the more excellent way. He says, you think the gifts are not the epitome of
The
spirituality,
apex.
the apex, and you can feel like it is. You can feel like if you operate in the gifts or you're in a group that does that, that you guys are in on the mountaintop of spirituality because you're operating the gifts, and they are spiritual things, as Paul
Mhm.
said. But he says, but there's something that's so much higher than
Mhm.
all of that. Love is the highest of the high.
Mhm.
Love is the greatest of all. He says it in this chapter.
Mhm.
And so that's where the real maturity is. You can be very immature spiritually and still operate in the gifts of the Spirit.
Yeah.
But you cannot know love and still be immature because love is the maturity.
Yeah.
It is true
I
godliness.
love that he starts out with love is patient because it requires patience to allow all this diversity and different people having different gifts and different people operating at different, I guess, maturity levels of the gift, that it takes this sense of patience that people are allowed to grow at the
Mhm.
rate that they are to grow, and they are allowed to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. There's just this, I don't know, this beautiful thing about patience
Right. And
in growing.
yeah, and so he's giving Christ likeness in this, patient
Mhm.
with one another. And then you can see if you bring it in context from chapter 12 and 13 running together, he says this. Now think about the gifts as he's saying this. He says, love does not envy. Love does not parade itself. Love is not puffed up. Love does not behave rudely. It does not seek its own. So when he's talking about the gifts and he's saying, don't let it be about that, let it be for the edification of others. There again, you can see how this flows right with that. He says, but love is not puffing itself up. It's not parading itself.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be seen in the church gatherings necessarily. But if anyone's going to say something, let it be for edifying, for helping somebody,
Mhm.
and not because I'm spiritual and I have a gift.
Yeah. I was even thinking for my own self, like in loving my own self and my own growth, there were seasons of time where I was just so frustrated with my, I guess you could say, lack of growth, but that there was this patience of like learning, oh, I'm growing.
Yeah.
Like it's okay that I'm not here or compared to this person. I'm just on my own path, and it's a
Mhm.
good path, and it is a growing path. And for me to just stay in my lane and not be comparing and judging and even judging myself, like that maturity of even seeing my
Mhm.
own growth is I think, a beautiful thing
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. And there's something about acknowledging and celebrating your own growth, but also at that same time in our growth, we realize there was so much more for us to know, and it's
Yeah.
good and it's
Yeah.
exciting and it's fun. So it's not like you can't even compare because even if somebody seems like they know God more than you or know more about God than
Uh-huh.
you, or they do some, uh, we're all still so far from knowing everything there is to
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
about God. And so it's exciting.
I think when you have patience for yourself, that you start to see how much patience other people deserve, you know, like, you're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I was impatient with them, but look at how I could use some,
Yeah.
understanding."
And he even says in this chapter that we're looking at, as he talks about love, he says because prophecies will fail, tongues will cease, and they do at some point. And he says where there's knowledge, it will vanish away. So the things that is listen, this is interesting. Where there's knowledge, you want to boast in that? And he says it's going to vanish away. Why? Because we know in part and we speak in part. So that's why he also says, so if any man thinks he knows something, he knows nothing like he ought to know.
Mm.
So even what we know, he says, it will vanish away because you're only knowing in part. You're going to know more. You're going
Yeah.
to grow more. So it's not like, well, this is what I know.
Mhm.
And I even feel that when I talk about like, yeah, I know God, but I know that what I know is going to
It's
change.
partial.
It's
It's
partial.
it's
Yes.
growing.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and you'll even say, like, when people ask you, "What how do you see something?" You'll be like, "Well, this is how I see it today."
Yeah. That's what we
Because
say.
you're hoping that you're gonna grow.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
hoping that things
This
might
is where I'm at today.
change.
And he as he's lifting up love, he says, but when that which is perfect has come,
Mhm,
and he's lifting up that, and he says, this is the perfect love, it's God. And he
mhm,
says, in that, that which is in part is done away. So we grow in the
mhm,
knowledge of him and the knowledge of love. And
mm,
then that which we know in part, it vanishes and we take on this more that we see. And it's always more in line with him, with love. And
mhm,
so grace is drawing us to love, and
mm.
we're learning love, and we find ourselves, we're more compassionate now. Don't do it perfectly yet, but I'm more compassionate and growing,
Right.
and we're patient with ourselves, and
Mhm,
we're patient with others, like you say. And love is really what it's all about.
mhm,
I like that being the mark of Christ. I like that being the target.
mm.
That this is where we're being drawn into. This is where we're going deeper
Right,
into that.
because love reflects God's character. I mean, God is love, and so we're reflecting God when we're loving,
Yeah.
and I love that he spent a concerted amount of time describing what love looks like.
So why does he
So
say
beautiful.
where there's prophecies, they'll fail. Where there's tongues, they will cease. And
Mhm,
where there's knowledge, will pass away.
mm,
What I find is, so tongues is talked about in the Bible. For instance, in Romans, where it talks about the Spirit helps us to pray when we don't know what to pray as we ought. And I would say that in my life, I would pray in tongues a lot more at one time earlier in my Christian life. And time as I've awakened to God's grace and tasting and experiencing and coming into more knowledge of His love, I find often that I don't lack for words so much. I'm expressing things that I feel. There's a lot of love that I express to God. There's a lot of gratitude that I
mhm,
express. And so I find myself not having to pray in a tongue that I don't understand in order to pray correctly, because revelation causes us to know more. He says when we don't know what to pray,
mhm,
that's how it helps us, how he helps
mhm,
us in that. But as you grow, you come to know God more and you know more. So the gifts like that, for like tongues, it's not a sign of of being at the apex of spirituality. It's him helping us. That's what
mhm.
all that is. And
Yeah.
these gifts, they help us,
Mhm,
they enhance us,
mhm.
they help us to get along with where we're going. They're
Right.
not something that
Like our end goal.
our end goal, and not necessarily equipped with forever in our life. There have been times in my personal life where I mean, I I needed a word from God, and when and someone gave have I can think of a couple of instances where someone gave me a prophetic word, a prophecy from God to me, and it was like a drink of beautiful fresh water in the desert. It
Life-giving.
it
Yeah.
it allowed me to go another day, man. I
Mhm,
can go on because that word brought me edification, exhortation, and comfort.
mm,
It felt like it was life-saving.
yeah.
But as you get acclimated to being loved and accept that and have that love and value in your life,
Mhm.
you don't find yourself so thirsty. You find yourself drinking from the fountain more.
Mhm.
But I didn't know how at that time. I'd get weary, I'd get confused, I'd get tired, I'd be blinded in
So
some ways
good. Yeah.
that would bring that about. But the prophecy was there. The goodness of God helped me with prophetic words or some gifting of the Spirit to help me. But
Mhm.
it's not about us receiving prophecies forever and ever and ever. It's about us knowing love, and even the giftings will point us in that direction.
That's a really good point, a really good explanation.
Yeah, and then and it gets really, really beautiful and powerful here because he's talking about that this is the he starts off by saying it's the more excellent way, and he gets into it and he says, "This is that which is perfect. And when that which is perfect has come, the partial is done away." And he says, because that's like before, it was like I was a child and I was playing with child things, but when I become a man, I drop those child things and I take up on grown up things, and the
Mm,
grown up thing is love. That's
mm,
why love is maturity. And when he talks about now, it's like we're looking in a glass or a mirror, but it's dark. He says we're
mhm,
looking at it darkly, but then we're going to see face to face. This is seeing love, who
mm,
he is. And he says, and we will know just like we're known. The way God loves us, we see
mm.
ourselves that way. We know who we are. And he
Yeah.
finishes with this: now abides faith, hope, and love. Three wonderful, wonderful things. But the greatest is love because that's God
Uh,
Himself. And
Where does he go from there?
he's still talking about the gifts
Uh-huh.
because he goes to chapter 14 and he's talking about prophecy.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's saying prophecy is a good gift. He
Yeah.
says, and in fact, he says, actually, prophecy is better than speaking in tongues because they can understand what you're saying, unless somebody interprets the tongue, and then it's equal, then it's the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
So he talks about all that, and again, it's about for the use of edifying, and he talks about he says, so let's do this, let's have this in the church, but let's have it in a way that's going to bless people and help people.
Mhm.
He says, and the way that you guys are doing sometimes, if somebody that doesn't know about any of this, they come in and you're all speaking in tongues, he's like, they're going to think this is a crazy
It's
house here.
confusion.
Yeah. He
Yeah.
says, but if you prophesy, and here's what we want to say about that prophecy, the definition of prophecy is inspired speech. It doesn't have to be, yea, yea, thus saith the Lord, or that kind of where you go into King James English and pretend that it's God, talking or it validates your prophecy because it's King James somehow. But anyway, we do what we do, right? But it's inspired speech. Preaching is prophetic utterance. If it's spiritual, and charismatic prophesying would be included in that. But just walking up and bringing edification, exhortation, and comfort from that place of love is that same gift.
Yeah.
So he says, but if someone that's unlearned, doesn't know anything, comes in, he says, and you guys are prophesying or giving spiritual utterances, he says, it'll touch his heart. He
Yeah.
says, and he will worship God and say, God is here. And because the truth of God as it's spoken that way has a way to touch hearts,
Mhm.
influence hearts, and we're all examples of that.
Funny thing is that when I first went to a charismatic church, this was like maybe in my 30s, and they were speaking just in the middle of the service, like a prophetic word, and it did come out in that King James version. It was attractive to me because I loved Shakespeare, and Shakespeare was such a beautiful language and beautiful to me that when I heard those words in that way, I don't know, it just touched me in a funny it's
You know
funny
what?
that
No, but it's
spoke to
good
me.
because see, it attracted you because of your background.
Mhm.
So you had an attraction to that. It lit up. Well, they had a particular background, and certain of these gifts attracted them,
Uh-huh,
not in the same way that you for the same reasons, but it was something in their background that
uh-huh,
they're like, I like this.
uh-huh.
And so that's interesting that you would bring
Well,
that up.
actually, when I was working at a Renaissance fair, and we did a Shakespeare production during that time, we were asked to read from a King James Bible to get our language correct,
Yeah.
in the right rhythm and cadence.
Yeah.
And but it didn't the Bible that didn't mean anything to me at all. It was more about the language.
No, but you are very good at speaking the King's English. I know that. Take
Oh,
it from me.
but I just think that's so, interesting how God meets us,
Yeah.
where we're at.
Yeah.
But I do wanna say in that same church, you know, we're tongues would just break out anywhere, and then somebody would
Interpret.
interpret it. It was so new to me and interesting, but it could get wearisome. And I know at one point the pastor kind of changed the dynamic of it so that it wasn't so disruptive
Yeah.
because it was a very large congregation and it could go on for
Right.
hours.
And that's a thing. And you still there's got to be someone mature to be able to lead when you're having
Yeah.
public gatherings like that.
Yeah.
And Paul addresses that in their gatherings as they get together, and he says, "Let it be done, but let it be done decently and in order." And
Yeah.
they said, "That's what I'm saying."
Yeah.
And I'm not putting the kibosh on any move of the Spirit or anything. He said, "Let it be done, but let it be done decently and in order." And decently in order is for the edification of the people. Let all things be done for
Mm.
edifying. Let it
Mhm.
be to bless, to help
Mm.
somebody. That's what we do.
I like that you say that even going up to somebody and speaking from that place of love and
To give
bringing
encouragement.
comfort or encouragement, even that is, it might seem like a small thing, but it's actually a beautiful way of
How many
operating.
times do
Yes.
you'll run into someone and they'll say, "I don't know if you remember, but that you said this particular thing," and
Hmm.
you're like, "I didn't even know what I was doing. I was
Yeah.
just, But anyway, that's the beauty of God, the things of the Spirit, the gifts of God, and especially the love of God in all things. Remember, in all things, this is why we call our podcast the third option. Love is the greatest of all, and love is God, and
Hmm.
love is what the kingdom of God is all about.
It's really where we're moving towards
Mhm.
is this maturity of love,
Yeah,
of pure
yeah,
love, and that's
yeah,
where we're all heading.
yeah.
So
That's where the power is. God so loved the world.
yeah, beautiful. Thank you for joining us today. If you think this episode might encourage someone else, feel free to share it, pass it along. If you have questions or things that you'd like to converse with us about, we're very open to that and we'd love to hear from you. So feel free to reach out to us on our social media platforms or our website at rickmanis.com.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.